we're going to talk about actions and outlets. And before we do so, we're going to look at how our screen is actually rendered on an iOS app. We have an iOS application, as you can see. There's an app which is present there. When you launch the iOS application, basically a window is allocated by the iOS ecosystem for your application. Now, the window doesn't have anything that is visible, it's just a clear screen, but that's the container under which everything else is going to run. So there's a window which is present. Now, the main controller, which is probably the view controller associated with the main storyboard, which is present in your photo playlists file, is going to be attached to the root view. And that's going to happen when your app is getting launched. Now, of course, the lifecycle methods which you have already covered, your view will appear, will get called when when the view is just about to be attached to the root view hierarchy and going to be made visible on the window. Now, the view itself can has a lot of subviews that we can assign, and we do so by having inside the subviews normal widgets like buttons, labels, date pickers, or we can even have some container widgets like car controllers, which can be present and they can all be stacked up. Now, we'll worry about stack views a bit later, but that's the high level idea. Now, what we did was we actually went forward and created a simple application and didn't do much. It's a Hello World application and we want to relaunch it. It simply has a launch screen which is pink and a blue screen which is our main storyboard, and it's a label Hello World. As you can see, the label basically is hard coded to be Hello World. It's not something which is dynamic. And at present, everything worked without the need for an action or outlet. So let's start looking at why would we need an action or outlet. We'll begin with outlets. And in this example, the hello world was pretty straightforward. It was a label which was added to my storyboard and it actually gets displayed. But what if I wanted this to be somewhat dynamic? I wanted to basically greet, instead of just saying hello world, I wanted to go forward and say something like hello Robert. So if I say hello Robert, I'm actually pulling in the name of the customer from some database network call, some shared preferences from some place, and then I'm going to dynamically inject the value onto the screen. Now for that, my view controller, which is going to have the logic to talk to the network, talk to the database, or to read the shared preferences, need to have the capability to actually talk to my storyboard. And in a way, you can start thinking of it as it requires the capability to connect to the storyboard. And it does so by using outlets, just like you can think of power outlets, or you can think about you needing an outlet to actually connect to so you can get onto the network. The similar concept which is present, your V controller needs an outlet so that it knows how to reach out to this label and change its value. Let's look at first the example and see how we can actually go forward and dynamically change it. We have a view controller which is present here, doesn't do much here. We have the main storyboard. Now, when you want to connect to an outlet, of course, you can select that element and then you can go forward and control click it. You can see that as soon as I select the element and press the control key and drag my mouse, a selector comes in to indicate where I would intend to drop it. And I can drop it to the view controller or the view, but that's not how you're going to create an outlet. Okay, so you will have to go to an assistant view, and the way you can do it is that you can go and click on this icon on the top right, and this will actually open up your assistant view, or you can just simply go forward and open it up from the view itself. I'm going to close my right side bar so I get more space to view. I can go forward and click my view controller so that I can see my view controller as well as the storyboard at the same point in time, and I can see both right now. I'm going to now select my label widget, and I'm gonna do control, press the control key, and as the control key is pressed down, you're going to drag your mouse over to the view controller and you're going to go forward and release it. And you can see that on certain portions of the screen where you can actually go forward and drop the control, there's a new row which comes up which says insert outlet or outlet collection. It knows it's a label, so it can only be an outlet. And other places you cannot drop it. I'm going to drop it at the top. Now it says it's an outlet. It's a view controller. It asks me what name do you want, and I'm just going to say greeting label. Okay. So it went forward, and it basically used its greeting label is what we call as an implicit optional. So you see the exclamation mark. It's an implicit optional. And now I need to set some name. Now, essentially speaking, in a real life example, what you will have is that you will have a variable which will probably store something like a customer name, and it can be optional. You inside your view did load, you will probably make a network call and get this customer name. Okay, so you'll go and get the customer name, and the customer name can be something like Robert testing. And then just before your view is about to appear, you will go forward and you will access your outlet. And outlet was greeting label. So I can go forward a greeting label, and it was implicit optional. So I can directly go forward and use text on it. And I can go forward and assign it a value. Here I'm going to go forward and try and say something like hello Robert, or hello customer name. Now this is going to complain a bit because remember customer name is optional, right? So as I go forward and do this, then it's going to say you're trying to do implicit interpolation, which is not really a good way of doing things. So, and I don't want to do force and wrapping because I don't know whether this network call actually succeeded or not. So I'm going to use optional binding. So I'm going to say that if let cust name equals customer name, okay, then I'm going to go forward and set the label. And here I'm going to use custom name, and that's basically sets it. And pretty much that's all you need to do. When you did a control click on the selected label, it could have been a button, it could have been anything because you can change the label of a button as well, and you can drag and drop onto a storyboard, and then it's an outlet which has been created. From that point onwards, you can just use this outlet to refer and connect to the UI and update the values inside the UI. I'm going to run it just to make sure everything looks dandy. It's a long name, so probably I'm going to see a bit dots, but you get the idea. It's basically going forward and uh, now dynamically printing the name. Now, of course, this dot 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 is probably not good, and we're going to talk about it in detail when we talk about traits and the UI handling for different devices. We're going to talk more about it. But for now, we're just going to focus on actions and outlets. So outlets, we have got it working. Another point to know is that if you ever want to actually delete an outlet, I'm going to close out of this guy. If you ever want to delete an outlet, okay, many people think that they can simply go forward and choose to go to the view controller and just delete this IB outlet. They will go forward, delete this IB outlet. Let's go forward and do that. Okay. I went forward, deleted the IB outlet. I'm still gonna keep the customer name for the time being, and I'm gonna comment out this piece of code. Okay, so in a way, the whole IB outlet piece is deleted, and they would think that okay, fine, I deleted the IB outlet. It's not being used anymore. Let's go forward and run it. And now, to their surprise, the code is not going to really work. Okay, and it's going to crash. The app actually crashed, and the reason is that's it's not just that the view controller has a variable name IB outlet. There are hooks which are now being present, and you define those hooks when you linked it from the storyboard, dropping onto the view controller using an assistant view. Now, if you really want to delete the outlet, you can have you should actually go forward and delete the reference to it from the referencing outlets as well. And this is important because many programmers get stuck here. They will go forward and delete the code, but then when they actually run the code, then nothing really happens. But now everything's working, it's BAU, like it was working before. I'm gonna control Z out of it, and so that our outlet is actually working. Okay, cool. And you will see that since I added the outlet back, now at this time I will see the proper name. All good. Let's talk about actions. Now, we have talked all about outlets so far, but the other portion is that I sometimes want something to happen in the reverse. Is that not that my controller has bunch of data that they want to get populated on the screen. There are occasions where we will need it. We will need to update the labels. We need to update a lot of records on the UI element. But then there are other elements where there's some action being performed by the user on the screen, which needs to be notified, or we need to be aware of that action having performed and then do something. It could be something like there's a login button on the screen and the customer has entered the user password, presses the login button, and now is the time for us to actually make the network call to perform authentication and see whether it's a valid user or not, and then show the appropriate messaging. So let's go forward back to our storyboard. And for actions, I am going to go forward and drop a new widget. This time it will be button. So I'm going to drop a button saying something like, say hello. Right? So it's a button, it says hello, doesn't do much right now. I'm going to close this right to so as to get more space for myself. And I am going to go forward and move myself to assisted view. And let's go forward and do that. Now I'm going to select view controller. So I have view controller and the storyboard both open at the same point in time. All good. Now you select your button, and the way you introduce an action is again control, press the control key and drag and drop the arrow. Now, as you can see, just like outlets, you are up places where you can actually go forward and insert the action, and the markers will get highlighted where it's actually visible. So let's go forward and drop it here. I'm gonna call this action say hello action, and I'm gonna connect it. Now, as you would notice that as a parameter, the sender is of type any, so it can accept any type. But we know that it's a UI button, so I'm just going to cast it to UI button, so I don't have to go forward and change it if I want to do something very specific for UI button related activities. Now I can actually go forward and add code here, which will go forward and display alert view. And the way we can actually do that is go forward and call UI alert view controller, and we can define the title, the message, and the controller style. And for the title, I'm just gonna say is alert. For the message, I'm gonna say hello to customer name. Okay. And if I use customer name again, I will have to use a if else syntax to actually unwrap it properly. I will do that. And this one is UI alert view style. So I am going to say is UI alert controller dot style and be done with it. Now I have got myself instance of the UI view controller, and I can go forward and choose a type, and it can be an alert, can be an action sheet. So let's go forward and we say that's a type alert. Um, now, that is a UI view controller which I'm getting. So I'm going to go forward and get the object. Okay, alert controller. Okay. And now that I have an alert, I also need to define what's the action which is present. Now, if I just go forward and show the alert without action, how am I going to go forward and close it? So I'm going to add an action, and it will be a new UI alert action. Okay, so action, we're going to say UI alert action, and it needs to have a title and a handler and some style. And the title I'm just going to say is close, and it has UI alert action style, UI alert action dot style dot, I'm gonna say cancel, and I don't need to specify. I'm just intend to close it, so I don't really need to specify uh, anything for this. Dot. So I am going to go forward and present this viewer controller. So U controller to present is going to be my alert controller. And animated, yes, why not? I'm gonna animate it. I don't need any completion handler, and that takes care of it. I'm also going to go forward and copy paste this piece of code so that I don't have the warning which I'm currently seeing. And that's my action. Now, again, the actually implementing an action did not require all these steps because all I had to do was to select the element like a button, and then I had to press the control key and drag and drop into the right area on my view controller inside my assistant mode when I'm in the system mode. But this code which I'm writing, I'm just writing so that I can show you how that it actually works. I could also just put a breakpoint and write a print statement, and that would have done that. But just wanted to showcase that it actually works. Okay, the app actually crashed. The primary reason is because I actually accidentally went forward and defined the controller and just call it on present. So I'm actually just defining the controller and calling present on them. I just need to say self, which is my current view controller rather than alert controller. So I'm gonna hit the play button again, and this time around, I see the say hello. I clicked upon it. I see the alert. It says the say hello to Robert testing, and it closes. If you're really skeptical whether it got called or not, you can just put a breakpoint, and you can go forward and hit on say hello again. The code will actually stop here. You can decide to step into it, see it actually getting executed, and that's pretty much it. So that's how you go forward and define your outlets and actions. And again, like I said, you can go forward and do both on an object. You can go forward and have the single object do both outlet and action. For example, we're talking about button. Now labels definitely will have just an outlet because you want to connect to a label from your view controller and update some text. But for a button, it's will primarily have an action for sure because the button user going to tap upon it, click upon it, and that needs to be handled, and view controller will be handling it. But it can have an outlet as well because you might want to have the text of the button dynamic as well. And let's do that for our example. I'm again going to go forward into the assistant mode here, and I am going to go forward and select my button, and just like I did with any label, I'm going to control drag and drop it in my view controller. And it has option for outline action and outlet controller, but I'm going to choose an outlet this time, and I'm going to say is button label. Okay, it's probably not the best name, but for now it will do. So it's button label that we want to choose. So now you have got the outlet to the button, and simply you want to set the text, and the best places to do it is again view will appear. So we'll just go forward and refer to the button label. But I named it button label. Probably I should have just named it as button. Wrong choice, because the button is a button which is a label but it's actionable. So it has functions. You will not be able to refer to the property text directly inside it, but it has a function which is available, which is set title. So I'm going to call set title. I need to set some title. So I'm going to say hello to, and it will be cuss name. And then I need to specify the UI control state. And that's the fun part because the UI control state can be a lot, which means is that you can have a different title for each different UI state. For now, I'm just gonna stick to normal so that I can just see that, okay, my outlet is really working. So I hit the play button again. This time, as the storyboard actually launch screen comes up, it's still loading. So now it comes up, it says say hello to Robert testing. So now at present, this button has an outlet. I'm using the outlet to set the label which should be displayed on the button. I click on it. I'm basically calling upon an action, and the action is present in the view controller as well. And it's a say hello function, which goes forwards and shows the alert controller and displays the alert controller on the screen. I can hit the close button, land back on my original screen. So that's how actions and outlets actually work. We're gonna talk a bit more on how to actually go forward and implement multiple widgets inside the same storyboard and how you can use stacked views a bit later in the next videos. Thank you.